Good morning, everybody. I just wanted to provide an update to the state following a State Disaster Management Committee meeting and to provide an update on a couple of fronts. Firstly is the low pressure system which is impacting the northern part of our coastline, but also to update everybody on the situation in the northwest and the resupply of fodder and opportunities to help our primary producers there as well. As we mentioned yesterday, there remains a greater than 50% chance of the low system forming into a cyclone. And on the back of that, a tropical cyclone warning has been put in place. That area has now tightened between Innisfail and Proserpine, so that is the area of the tropical cyclone warning. There is a severe weather warning, and that relates particularly to heavy rainfall, and that exists between Tully and St Lawrence. And St Lawrence is the area about halfway between Mackay and Rockhampton, so a large area, but it shows you where our focus is. We have three areas that we're really focusing on today. One is obviously the rainfall, which leads to the potential for flooding, and then there's the preparations for the recovery. They're the three areas that I want to discuss today. So I'm going to start on the rainfall. There remains the real prospect, and we're starting to see it already, of heavy rainfall across that large area, and that heavy rainfall will continue into next week. And that is our great concern remains that rainfall, because it can lead to flooding in a large part of the state on the coast. Many of these areas have received big rainfall in the last week, some of them north of 1/2 metre. So with those sodden catchments coupled with rainfall that will be intense for large parts of that area across multiple days, there's the real risk of flooding in the area, and that's why we want to get ahead and express to people the need to prepare and to know that we've done the same, and we're taking this seriously and we're asking Queenslanders to do the same. Just on the recovery preparation, I'll go into shortly, but I want people to know how important it is that if there is a heavy rainfall event and if there is flooding, we have to be able to switch quickly from response to recovery, and that's the most important thing, and we are putting in place the resources and the personnel to be able to do that. But our major priority right now is for people to prepare, take that remaining window to do so, and I have every faith in the ability of North Queenslanders to be able to handle events like this as they so often do. Let me just turn briefly to a couple of other areas before I get into those preparation things. So let me start with transport. I mentioned yesterday, but I want to refresh this. 11% of the state-controlled networks in Queensland have been impacted over the course of the last week, and that shows you how widespread the flooding has been and the challenges. And whilst roads like the Bruce remain open, we've seen the impacts of flooding, and with heavy rainfall, it's important that people stay up to date. The single point of contact, that disaster.qld.gov.au website, will have the link to make sure that people see what roads are out of action, but it's important that people do that. I can just provide an update. This has only come through in just moments ago before standing here, but the Townsville Airport has advised that it will be closed this afternoon from 4 p.m. And then obviously will reopen hopefully on Sunday, and that will allow them to give us that information. We'll share that with you, and the moment we have information on the Proserpine Airport, we'll share that as well. So I just want to turn to the pre-deployment. Yesterday I spoke about the fact that we've pre-positioned both people and assets in the area, and we put a big focus on this before the start of this disaster event. But I mentioned yesterday 35 additional SES crews. Well, there's another 21 that have arrived today, and I want to thank them for coming to help their northern mates, as we saw in reverse earlier in the event early last year, where crews from the north came and helped those in the south. And it's a big family, the emergency services, and I want to thank them. But to the extra police, the fire officers, the ambulance officers, I'm most grateful for them going in and assisting. And what they do is they help bolster the numbers, and on the ground you've got the locals who live and breathe wet weather conditions every day. They know how to handle these things. They are experts in their field, and having that extra horsepower arrives enables us to respond, and respond quickly. The Queensland Ambulance Service has, or will be shortly, pre-positioning a chopper in North Queensland, and that will be used if we need medical retrieval. And just as an indication of that recovery phase, QBuild has 56 staff members who are ready to go and go into those local areas where there are impact on state facilities. Many of these are very important facilities, so if there is flood damage to any of those, QBuild stand ready to assist. I want to turn to telecommunications because there has been some great concern, justifiably, in Townsville, in the Northern Beaches area and beyond, following some issues with connectivity that has been revealed earlier this morning. I believe that Telstra will be issuing a statement very, very shortly, and I'll point people towards that. But there will also be impacts on Optus customers as well as NBN and those providers because of what has happened. And what's happened is somebody has cut those telecommunications line while trying to steal copper from an area in Dirrigan. My message to that lowlife is you have put at risk the lives of North Queenslanders in their hour of need, and you can't get a lower act than that. And we intend to make sure that we throw the book at this individual when they are caught, because it's a pretty low act at any time, but during a disaster, that's about as low as you can get. Telecommunications are life and death, and to have them out of action because somebody will cut a line in a bid to try and steal something, that's, I might just leave that there for now. I'll turn to health. As I mentioned yesterday, services continue, and I do want to thank the Queensland Health staff right across the state for working around the clock when others are getting their families prepared, and I'm very grateful for that. I mentioned that there were 8 melioidosis cases yesterday. That remains the case, but I thought I'd provide an update as to where they are. 4 are in Townsville, 3 are in Cairns, and 1 is in the northwest. Late last year, we embarked on a campaign, a heavy education campaign around this, but the health ministers put out some really good correspondence as well, and I just urge people to have a look at that and familiarise yourself. I know right now we're focused on the potential impacts, particularly around the flooding, but if there is clean-up needed, and there likely will be, it is just so important that people take those precautions because it is a big risk, and this proves it. Okay, I just want to briefly touch on the events in Western Queensland. I spoke yesterday about the stock losses. There's been a handful of extra assessments from primary producers come in this morning, around about 60 now. The stock losses are now north of 40,000. This number will grow, and it will grow by many times, is my grave fear. And this shows with another handful that have come in, and yet many thousands of more beasts that have perished. So just a couple of things on that. First is we'll continue with the fodder drops, and had it not been for that, the stock losses would be far in excess of that. And I want to thank those people who've taken to the skies to be able to drop fodder for their fellow Western Queenslanders. We are also urgently bringing extra supplies of things like antibiotics in, because the big risk for animals in an event like this are things like pneumonia and getting bacterial infection when they're standing in water. So we're urgently trying to provide veterinary care to be able to minimise those losses. But it's 40,000 cows that have cattle that's perished at the moment, and I do fear that it will increase significantly as people take stock. And right now, they're desperately trying to save their animals, and we don't, we're under no illusions that when they take stock, it'll be far more problematic. I want the people of Western Queensland, whether they're on the land or whether they're in town, to know that we'll be with you not just for the short term but the long term, and the impacts for those on the coast won't divert our attention to make sure that every Queenslander who was impacted at the back end of last year and beyond will continue to be in our thoughts, because it is vital that those proud communities are able to pick back up the pieces after what's happened to them in the last fortnight, and I want to thank them for their resilience. We now have 17 local government areas that have been, in one way or another, been offered support, and that's everything from small and family business assistance, that's for helping them with the clean-up, that's primary producers and loans, but there's 17 different areas there, and I urge people to have a look and make sure that they know what eligibility is there. I just want to, one more time, just stress the single point of truth is that disaster.qld.gov.au website. And I know in an event like this, there's always multiple sources where people can get their news from, and that's important. But I want Queenslanders to know that when we get information, we will put it on that website. And there's also the local councils, your local government, will also have a link there. So that's a great single point of truth. And as we get the information, Queenslanders will get it. And I hope that people see that is the way that I want to lead things in a disaster recovery. If we know something, Queenslanders will know it, and I have every faith in Queenslanders being able to make the right call if given the right information. So that's a single point of truth. The Disaster Queensland website, please get on it. So finally, to everyone out there who is in that area, that cyclone watch area, and indeed the flood watch area, I want you to know that we're taking the event seriously, as I know you are. I've seen the images of people filling up sandbags. I've heard the stories. In many cases, it's for neighbours, and that shows everything you need to know about people, how they rally in an event like this. We are taking this seriously. It is a large area, but it's a part of the state that do it very well, and they know how to handle disasters. They're well versed in it. I just have every faith in Queenslanders being able to respond to an event like this. As I say, the major challenges is that heavy rainfall leading to flooding, and then our focus is on making sure that that recovery is seamless, and that's what I can guarantee will happen. I'm going to hand over now to Matt from the Bureau. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Premier, and good afternoon. Tropical Cyclone 12U is continuing to develop in the Coral Sea. It is around 350 kilometres northeast of Townsville, and it's moving south-southwest at around 15 kilometres per hour. The current satellite and radar imagery shows the bands of heavy rainfall wrapping around the low, predominantly on the eastern and the southern sides. In fact, the current radar imagery shows some of those bands wrapping in towards Townsville as we speak. It is these bands of heavy to intense rainfall that may result in flash flooding and riverine flooding over the next few days, and it is the key risk that we're concerned about with this system. As the Premier mentioned, a tropical cyclone warning is current, and they have been updated every 3 hours. The most recent one, issued at 11 a.m. this morning, has the tropical cyclone warning stretching from Innisfail down to Proserpine. That means that previously where the warning stretched right from Cooktown, including Cairns, those areas are no longer in the tropical cyclone warning area. The tropical cyclone warning is for the onset of winds in excess of 90 kilometres per hour within the next 24 hours. There remains a 50 to 60% chance of this system developing into a Category 1 tropical cyclone in the next 24 hours. Particularly overnight tonight on Saturday and into the early hours of Sunday morning. The most likely location for the coastal crossing is between Townsville and Ayr, and as I mentioned, as a Category 1 system. A severe weather warning also remains in place, and this is primarily for the locally intense and heavy rainfall, and it is dependent on the exact path of the system. So again, it is on the southern and eastern sides of the low is where we're seeing those intense bands of rain. That warning stretches from Tully in the north down to St Lawrence in the south. Again, that warning has been contracted as we're getting more certainty about where the system is moving and where the rainfall is expected. Rainfall totals in excess of 250 millimetres in 24 hours are forecast, with the possibility of multi-day totals in excess of 500 millimetres. Again, this may lead to the chance of dangerous and life-threatening flash flooding, as well as riverine flooding, particularly in those areas from Townsville stretching down the coast towards St Lawrence. Focusing on Townsville for a moment, we do have minor to moderate flood warnings current for the Barley, the Ross and the Black Rivers, as well as Blue Water Creek. Many catchments across the North Tropical Coast region are saturated due to heavy rain over the past week. So that dangerous and life-threatening flash flooding is particularly concerning over the next 48 hours. A major flood warning is current for the Horton and Herbert rivers, and warnings are continuing in the Tully, the Daintree, the Mulgrave Russell, the Burdekin and the Don rivers. All of those are in that minor to moderate range. There are also multiple warnings continuing for the inland and Gulf catchments. And I'll just remind you that the flood watches also continue right the way from the tip of the Cape all the way down through to St Lawrence. Again, as I said yesterday, this is an evolving situation. Overnight, in the last 24 hours, we have seen the low develop and consolidate and move south as expected. The low still has some work to do before it reaches tropical cyclone intensity, so that will be the key risk tonight, and those warnings, the tropical cyclone warnings, will be updated every 3 hours from here on in. The rainfall that wraps around this low is very concerning, and it will be dependent on the exact path of the low. So please stay up to date with the warnings on the Bureau's app and our website, and as the Premier mentioned, through emergency services and the Disaster Queensland web pages. Thanks.
Good morning. So at the State Disaster Coordination Centre, we are planning for both scenarios, whether or not it is a cyclone or a tropical low. Planning and preparation activities have moved towards both of those events occurring. So regardless of that, working with local councils where we are well prepared. And I thank those members of the local community that have conducted preparation activities as well. As the Premier mentioned, you have a small window of opportunity now to check your emergency kits, know the risk of the area that you're in, and be closely watching the Bureau warnings, as well as tuning into disaster.qld.gov.au for your warnings. That also has guidance and directional links towards local council disaster websites as well to provide that information. I can't again reiterate enough the message around staying out of floodwaters. Given some of the totals that across those watch areas that the Bureau is predicting, we will see flooding, we will see rapid rising of levels across creeks and rivers. And as I said to you, we can't stress enough to stay out of floodwaters, in particular in vehicles. Research conducted by our own forensic crash units has established that in as small amount of water as 15 centimetres above a roadway is sufficient to wash a vehicle from a roadway. Great concern around modern vehicles. Once your electronics become affected, often you cannot lower a window, and doors can become difficult to open as well. So you are at significant risk. And as I said, in as little water as 15 centimetres above the roadway. Police have conducted door knocking of some lower lying areas, particularly around Blue Water and Blue Water Park there, ensuring that residents know their evacuation plans and the risk for the area that they're in. As well as the Premier mentioned that copper theft which occurred and has placed residents at risk, working closely with Telstra, Optus and local police resources to provide door knocking and messaging to those locals within that area. And we'll be monitoring closely with Telstra and the other repairers there about the restoration of those activities. There is some overlapping in regards to mobile phones, and a local detective inspector is leading that investigation, and we will do everything we can to bring those people and place them before the courts in regards to that unlawful activity which they have now placed people's lives at risk. Again, we'll continue to work now on a 24/7 basis throughout the night, monitoring the Bureau and working with the Bureau there. At this stage, it looks like a crossing approximately around 7 a.m. in the morning. The Premier talked about those airport closures and those other activities which will occur. That will still allow us to conduct emergency activities dependent on the severity of the winds and of course the rain across there. And the Premier did mention the relocation of a QG Air Rescue helicopter or an additional QG Air Rescue helicopter to Townsville with winching capability as well as that crew. And that concludes my briefing. Thank you very much.
Thanks everyone. Thank you. Over to you for questions. Thank you.
Just on the Durgan copper theft.
Yeah.
Do we know if customers can still call 000?
Telstra will be updating the public via their statement and their website. What we've been informed is that most of the impacts is to landlines. Most people still have access to mobile services, but there is a small area in Mount Low Mountain Oak Parkway area there, where there is impact on people's ability to phone. We've been assured that that won't impact the ability for them to phone 000, but again, go to Telstra and Optus directly for that. But that's the assurance we received this morning.
Yeah, and how quickly they could potentially get that back online.
They did mention that this morning. They've got crews working there and have done from this morning, and I've asked them to include that as part of their update to you as well.
And you mentioned whereas only about 11% has been impacted. Are you concerned more roads could be impacted? And what about getting supplies and food into these communities?
Yeah, good question. We've taken the window between the events to do as much resupply as we can, and I know some of the supermarkets are also working on opportunities to do so via sea as well. But there is the real risk, if there's heavy rainfall, that roads that are vulnerable, and we have far too many of them, will be out of action. Hence the reason why we've taken every opportunity to pre-deploy as many of those emergency assets as possible, but also to work with those other providers to get their goods and services in as much as possible as well.
Power outages, how likely are we to see those?
It's a prospect, and it will the amount of impact on power will depend obviously on the severity of the wind, but also the heavy rain can mean that trees fall, and ultimately that provides the biggest challenge. Look, I've got every faith in people doing the right thing. I genuinely do, but it is important to know that the likes of Ergon have pre-positioned assets there, and in the same way that the Ergon workers came to the southeast, if it's required, the favour will be returned the other way in spades.
Just some questions for the Bureau,
Yeah.
if that's okay.
Matt.
Can you expand a bit more about what's to come in the coming days or even week, as you mentioned, with this heavy rainfall?
So at the moment, we haven't seen rainfall totals at the moment have been about 50 to 100 millimetres along that part of the coast. It is the next 24 hours we expect those higher numbers to come in, and the parts of the coast stretching from sort of Innisfail in the north down to St Lawrence in the south. That's over the next sort of 24 to 48 hours. Beyond that, the system and the rainfall, the system actually weakens and moves a little bit inland, but the rainfall stays on the coast and stretches down towards the southeast. So by the time we get through to Tuesday and Wednesday, we do see rainfall stretching down through Bundy and right down to Brisbane in the southeast. But those rainfall totals look like at this stage in that sort of 100 millimetre range in a 24-hour period. So not necessarily concerning, and the catchments down this part of Queensland aren't as saturated, anywhere near as saturated as those ones up further north.
In those communities in the north, when I guess the crossing happens in those days after, what areas so far with this tracking do you expect to cop the brunt of this rainfall?
So if the system moves as expected, and that is between Townsville and Ayr, and you can imagine those communities that are immediately to the sort of to the east and south down the coast, as the system comes ashore, they will be in line for the heaviest rainfall, and then that will spread down the coast. So heaviest rainfall into Sunday, and then it'll spread down the coast as we move into Monday.
And you mentioned 500 millimetres. How many days do you believe that would be?
It's primarily on the next 24 hours and into Sunday, but into sort of Sunday evening and Monday morning would still be extensively heavy rainfall. And as I said, it does contract from that far north coast. So it might contract from areas like Ingham and Townsville and continue down the coast towards Rocky and then Mackay as we get further down the coast.
Just maybe a question for police on, are we aware of any rescues or incidents so far or overnight in the past 24 hours?
So there's no incidents, or rescues or anything of that nature that are related to this weather event.
And then I just have another question on something.
Thanks.
It's just in relation to child safety or is another.
All right, I will take that. Is there any other questions disaster related? Because people are tuning in online and they can go and leave when they need to. Anything else?
Ask you about like what kind of, I know that you said that obviously Queensland is no best habit
Yeah.
care, but what would you recommend them to do at this stage in time? What preparation should
Well,
they get?
well, we've seen in the last couple of days people mobilising and getting sandbags, those who know they're in the low-lying area. If you're new to the area, find out, make sure that if you are in one of those zones that you know about it, and that if there's a flooding risk for your property, know what to do, when to go and how to prepare. Make sure that you've got non-perishable items and you've got bottled water. Those things are very important. But again, I stress, I genuinely believe that Queenslanders across the board are very good at dealing with disaster situations, and North Queenslanders are particularly good at it and are very resilient people. And our role is to give them information in real time, and I have faith in the vast majority of them to be able to make the right call having done that.
And maybe it might be best for the Bureau as well. We've seen with these systems before that sometimes they can slow down quite a lot as we reach the crossing. Is there a concern that this system could, I guess, linger over those communities through the weekend and even into next week?
Sure, we look at a range of different guidance, and you sort of look at how tight or how consistent that sort of guidance is in terms of the weather models and such like. There is a consistent picture in this case of the system continuing to sort of move inland as it goes across the coast, and that rainfall to sort of extend down the coast as the system weakens and goes inland. So as I said, we always monitor these things closely. Those track maps and the warnings, the tropical cyclone warnings, will be updated every 3 hours as we see the radar and the satellite imagery to really hone in on the low and how it develops. But at this stage, it's expected Sunday morning, early Sunday morning, to reach landfall between Townsville and Ayr, and then continue to weaken and track to the southwest.
On to other issues. Thank you.
So just recent articles report that 40,000 children have been left in unsafe environments with threat of physical or sexual harm. Can you tell us how long it's taking child safety officers to check on them?
Well, first I just want to address the issue of child safety, because it's important, and we have to do things to turn around what people are seeing and what those children are going through. And this is something that we recognise, and we've acted on it, and we will be doing everything we can to try and create a situation where our most precious are kept safe. We called a commission of inquiry very shortly after coming to government, so that's the state equivalent of a royal commission. And the reason why we did it is because of the most horrendous stories of kids falling through the cracks and being subject to incredible abuse. We did it because of the rise of the number of kids in residential care that's grown every single year, and the fact that they're not able to get the dignity and the care that they need to turn their life around. So this is what we're doing. We have implemented that Royal Commission to get to the bottom of the failings. We've given the single biggest increase in funding to the Department of Child Safety in the history of the department, and we are trying to get to the bottom of the Unify system, which is an absolute basket case and has been half a decade of the making. Now, I don't even think our political opponents could say the child safety crisis is a making because of the change of government. You know, it was half a decade ago a minister went to a rock concert in the wake of one of the most horrendous deaths of a Queensland child, right? This has been a long time in the making, but we are going to fix it, and we're going to get to the bottom of it, and that starts with transparency. And the best way to do that is to get the system fixed and then make sure that we analyse those numbers, that we report on them, and that we do everything we can. And one of the numbers that we've got to see come down is the number of kids in residential care. Because if we do that, and if we can get kids out of residential care and get them into a loving home, whether that's a family member, a safe family member, whether that's foster care and adoption, we've got to do that. We owe it to those vulnerable kids. So, sorry for the long answer, but it's important to us. The child safety situation in this state is it's one of the biggest crises facing our state, and we've recognised it, we're funding it, and it's got a long way to go, but you bet it's a priority for us.
Since Queenslanders haven't been able to see this data for 8 months because of Unify, but the department say they have these numbers manually inputted, those response times, which are very important for at-risk children. Why can't that be made public?
Well, the minister's assured me that data will be made available early this year. Now, you know my view, the more data you can share, the more you can monitor something, the more you can drive those numbers down. Now, again, I come back to my point. The minister wants these data out as much as anybody because it shows the challenges she has to overcome and the one that she's inherited. But I think she's up to the job and she'll do it. Firstly, it starts on fixing that system so that the information we share is right. The last thing I want to see is information go out that masks over how bad the problem is. We have to see it, we have to measure it, and we have to drive it down. And as I said, there is an under-resourcing of carers in the system. I spoke to one the other day. I was with John Krause in his electorate, and I had someone who works in the system in child safety, and she spoke to me at length, and it was a sobering conversation about the number of kids that she has to look after because of the pressure on the system and the fact we don't have enough. And we are employing more, and it'll take time, but we are employing more. So that's one of the issues. We have to get the ratio of kids per foster carer. We have to improve that. But I come back to the other one. I think residential care is the part of the system that I believe the Commission of Inquiry will show how broken it is. We've got more kids in Queensland in resi care per head of population than anywhere else, and we've got a greater proportion of really young kids in it too. And that doesn't make sense to me. As one person once put it to me, and he's one of the ones quoted in your story. He's very credible. It's Tom, and he said to me, he goes, if you're a young person and you have a different set of eyes put you down at night and then pick you up in the morning, it's very hard to turn your life around. And we've got to get kids out of resi care.
And some other advocates say that there hasn't been as much transparency on this data.
Yeah.
Do you dispute that? Do you think you've been...
No, I think those comments are fair, and that's a reflection of how broken the Unify system is. And the Minister is working overtime to fix it. She's assured me that early this year that system will be in a position to be able to share that data, and then the long journey to improving the numbers begins.
And just on the back of the National Police Ministers meeting yesterday, a part of those minutes, it says Anthony Albanese has written to state and territory leaders to join the Royal Commission. Is that something that Queensland is considering?
I haven't seen that yet, but I'm obviously happy to play any role that's needed, of course. Just on that meeting yesterday, the Police Minister put out a statement. We will be discussing all of the issues in a calm and a sober way. I've asked Dan as Police Minister and Deb Frecklington, the Attorney General, to lead that. It'll be, the Cabinet will discuss it in a measured way. We'll make sure that it's transparent, and we'll make sure that we put the safety of people at the forefront.
Have you been briefed about what proposals were discussed in that meeting? Was it the same as the December meeting?
Not yet. I haven't, no.
And do you have a position yet on the buyback scheme, or will that be?
We'll be taking that to Cabinet. So I should allow the Cabinet process to be able to run the way it should. All right, everyone. Thanks very much.